What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you 5 more fantasy races that I really enjoy. Now, I have made a previous version of this video where I talked more about the races from things like D&D and Pathfinder that I play more regularly, whereas with the second video, I want to talk about fantasy races from different kinds of media for the most part, or at least with a bit of a broader genre focus. So things like MMOs that I've played previously that I really enjoyed certain races from, etc., or just ones that I think have really cool lore around them. But with no further ado, let's jump right into this and start this list off with one of my favorites from Guild Wars 2, actually, and that is none other than the Charr. Now, while I do think the Charr are visually pretty awesome, I really find their society intriguing. They're very militaristic, and when I used to play Guild Wars 2, one of the things that really stood out to me about them was how their entire society is boiled down to basically their role in the military forces, where the cubs of the Charr really only spend like a few years with their parents before being shipped off to immediately start learning about war, and then eventually they become part of a squad, which is their family, more or less. So their pretty unique appearance, combined with that kind of interesting societal structure, makes them one of my favorites. Now, moving on from there, we have the lizards from the Divinity universe. So I love the Divinity universe, and they've got a lot of interesting stuff going on when it comes to the fantasy races of that universe. However, my favorite's probably overall the lizards. Now, unfortunately, we don't get to see a lot of their society explored, but it does get talked about a great deal in games. One of the things that I really like about this is that there's the obvious, are they somehow related to dragons stuff going on? But beyond that, while we never get to see it, every mention that we hear of their kingdom is about how it's this gigantic sprawling empire that spans the desert and is all very exotic in its nature. There's also the quest that we do see in-game around how they have people in their society known as dreamers who allow them to see things in dreams, which lets them do all sorts of things really, like see visions of the future, that type of stuff. And overall, just a very cool take on a lizard race, especially since they're often portrayed as more imperial and regal than lizards typically would be, which I thought was really cool. Then third on the list, we have the Godlike from Pillars of Eternity. Now, these ones I don't necessarily like including on a list like this because Godlike in Pillars of Eternity is a very broad term. There's tons of different kinds of godlike. In fact, being a godlike in some ways is more of an aspect of who a person is rather than their race, because there are godlike that can be born to every type of race, and their stature, etc., is often determined by their parents. However, being a godlike basically means they were touched by a god in the womb and given a portion of its essence in some way, which causes their physical appearance to then manifest as the type of god that did it. So as such, there's a godlike for every type of god that there is. They vary in shape, form, etc. So while you can't really just say godlike and have like a specific thing in mind, they are nonetheless really interesting because of the lore that surrounds them, especially when you start digging into things like why would the gods want to make these people? And overall, just a very cool concept, and I really appreciate it in game. Now, for our fourth one on the list, we have the Khajiit. Now, I'm going to level with you. The Khajiit are an interesting one for me. Obviously, it's from Elder Scrolls, but I find catfolk, etc. a little generic. It's one of those things that gets done a lot. But one of the things that I really enjoy about the Khajiit is the fact that they have, I think it's 16 different forms, depending on when they're born during the phase of the moon, which combined with all their unique pantheon and stuff going on in the Elder Scrolls as well, I think helps them set themselves apart from the more generic stuff that tends to be attached to anything cat-related in video games or fantasy, honestly. And when it comes to Khajiit, I'm much more interested in their lore and all the stuff they've got going on with the moon than I am the race itself. And then last but not least for this particular list, one of my personal favorites for a very, very long time is none other than the Draenei from World of Warcraft. Now, I really like the Draenei because, let's be honest, space goats. In all seriousness, I used to play WoW a ton, and their story of being chased across the cosmos and being forcibly turned into Eridar, or just outright slaughtered, combined with their very unique appearance, has made them always one of my favorites. And combine that uniqueness with the fact that they were the first Alliance race to be able to be a shaman, which is my personal favorite class from World of Warcraft, naturally, I have played a Draenei Shaman literally ever since. Fun fact, the footage you're seeing in-game here is more than likely from the Shaman that I have played from all the way back in the 2000s. And while, to be honest, I don't really play WoW that much these days, I'm very attached to this character, and the Draenei, interestingly enough, with their kind of unique position of being a really interesting race with my favorite class attached to them, has made me very attached to the Draenei and their story in WoW, and it's something that I regularly keep up with as a result, even if I don't really play it these days, just as a fun anecdote. But there you go, guys, 5 of my favorite fantasy races, this time trying to reach a little bit beyond D&D and Pathfinder, but let me know what you guys think down below, as well as some of your favorite fantasy races. I know in the last video, people were very upset that I didn't include dwarves in here somewhere, but nonetheless, thank you so much for watching. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.